So, Apple had their first event of the year last week, and a lot of things were announced. But in this video, I want to talk more about the brand new M1 iPad Air and how it stacks up against the already existing M1 iPad Pro. Stay tuned to the video. What's up, people? This your boy Viper, the man about tech, captain of Team Apple, baby. Back again for the video. And if you're new here, I help you better understand and connect with the technology around you. So if that's something that you're interested in, smash that like button and hit that subscribe button, because who else is cutting your tech videos like a WWE promo? Nobody like the man about tech. So yes, we got a brand new announcement of a M1 iPad Air last week, and I want to talk about it directly against the already existing M1 iPad Pro. Now, I actually own the 12.9 inch M1 iPad Pro, but when I talk about the iPad Pro in this video, I'm going to be alluding more so to the 11 inch iPad, since it's the one that's closer in price to the new M1 iPad Air. So let's talk about displays with these iPads, Air versus Pro. The display size is practically negligible, as they are both practically the same size, one being 10.9 inches, the other being 11 inches. So the Air is slightly a tenth of an inch smaller than the Pro, so that doesn't really make a difference. But where the Pro has the advantages are in the things that display can do. Now, unlike the iPad Air, the iPad Pro display comes with ProMotion, which means it is 120 hertz and it fluctuates depending on what you're doing on the iPad. So if you're gaming, the refresh rate is going to be higher. If you're doing scrolling, it'll be lower, but it fluctuates. It has that ProMotion display that all the tech nerds love, but maybe the average consumer probably doesn't really care about too much, but it is there. Also, the iPad Pro has a brighter display. It is 100 nits brighter than the iPad Air. So if you're going to be using your iPad outdoors, the iPad Pro will definitely be a better fit for you, as the display is brighter than the iPad Air. Also, the iPad Pro has True Tone, which changes the color temperature of the display to make it easier on your eyes. To be honest, your boy Viper or boy True Tone like to play because it makes the display look kind of yellowish, and I just don't like how it looks. But if you need that extra eye protection, you can get that on the iPad Pro, and you cannot get that on the iPad Air. Next, we got to talk about the storage options and different things like that. Now, the iPad Air starts at $599, but the iPad Pro starts at $799. But the iPad Pro starts with twice the storage of the iPad Air. But depending on what size storage configuration you get for the iPad Air, it still may end up being cheaper for you in the long run than getting a spec'd up iPad Pro with the same storage. But again, do with that what you will. Also, the iPads have a similar amount of RAM. They both run with 8 gigabytes of RAM, except if you get a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte iPad Pro, those have 16 gigabytes of RAM. The iPad Air maxes out at 8. I told you before, more RAM equal more applications open, more things that the iPad can do in the background, and it'll allow you to get more work done depending on how much RAM the device has. But it depends on your use case. Unless you're doing some hardcore work, I don't think 8 gigabytes of RAM is going to be a handicap too much to the iPads, given that they both run iPad OS. So that's another point that I should probably make before we go further in this video. The differences between these iPads are basically in the hardware. Software-wise, there's nothing that one can do that the other cannot do, since they are both running iPad OS. Speaking of hardware, we gotta talk about probably one of the most glaring differences between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, and that is biometric authentication, baby. Oh yes. So the M1 iPad Air has the tried and true Touch ID fingerprint sensor, the thing we've been using for years upon years. It still works, it's reliable, and in COVID times, it's been the preferred method of unlocking devices. However, the iPad Pro obviously has Face ID, but starting in iOS 15.4, Apple will update Face ID to allow it to work with mask on. Now, this is less of an issue now that mask mandates are starting to come down and there's starting to be less and less need for masks, but you might be in a place that still requires a mask, and if you want to take your iPad mobile and use it with iPadOS 15.4, you can get it to work with Face ID with the mask on, so that's a good look. And we are expecting the release of iPadOS 15.4 any day now, so by the time you get these iPads in your hands, you should have iPadOS 15.4 on deck. Well, how about that camera system? Well, for the 5 of y'all that actually use your iPad to take pictures, you definitely want to look at the iPad Pro. For one, it has a dual camera system, but the iPad Air has one single camera, but the iPad Pro has a wide angle and an ultra wide angle lens. and it has a LiDAR sensor, although it has not used any of the camera tricks, but you do have more camera options and more versatility with the iPad Pro. However, the front cameras on both devices are identical, and they both support Apple's new Center Stage, which literally tracks your movements as you're going back and forth in the camera frame. So no matter which one you get, the iPad Air or Pro, Center Stage is supported on the front-facing camera, so you're not missing out there. Another major difference with the iPad is the speaker system. The iPad Air has a dual speaker system with a dual microphone setup, so it's good, but it's nothing compared to the iPad Pro, which has a quad speaker system with a 5 microphone array that Apple calls studio quality. So if you're doing more work on your iPad, taking more video calls, different things like that, chances are you want to look at the iPad Pro because it's going to have a better speaker system and microphone array for taking those video calls and making sure you sound crispy on your video calls. So definitely take a look at that if that's what you need. A more subtle difference between the iPads is their USB Type-C port. The port on the iPad Air supports 10 gigabits per second file transfers, which is pretty good. But the USB-C port on the iPad Pro is a Thunderbolt port, and it supports up to 40 gigabits per second for data transfers. So again, if you're doing more intensive work and you need to transfer large file sizes from hard drive to iPad, this, that, and the other, you definitely want to take a more of a look at the iPad Pro as you get those faster data transfer speeds on the iPad Pro. But Viper, what about the connectivity? Well, the iPad Air did add 5G, so both iPad Pro and Air support 5G. But the iPad Pro supports millimeter wave 5G, which is the fastest 5G out there possible, while the iPad Air only supports sub-6 5G. However, I don't really think this is a big deal because a lot of us aren't in millimeter wave areas and we can't take advantage of 5G. Hell, a lot of us aren't really in solid 5G areas quite yet, although the networks are a lot better than what they were a few years ago, but most of us still aren't really in the spots that we can take advantage of 5G. And plus, when you're inside buildings, 5G speed can be hit or miss still, but this is negligible. But if you do live in a millimeter wave area and you want the fastest 5G possible, you're not getting that with the iPad Air. You are getting that with the iPad Pro. So out of all the things that I've highlighted in this video, what is my recommendation to you? Well, for me, it's real simple. As I've highlighted throughout the video, if you are more of a person that's working, maybe you're running a business off your tablet, you do everything on your iPad is your go-to device, and you just needed to do all of the things, then you definitely want to take a look at the iPad Pro. Again, you got a faster USB-C port. You got a better video and speaker setup. You have more storage options, different things like that. The iPad Pro is definitely more of a productivity powerhouse than the iPad Air. However, if you're just using your iPad for basic tasks like web browsing, media consumption, things that are just not that intensive, then save yourself $200 and go get yourself an iPad Air. They both have the M1 chip, so the performance is going to be top-notch on either one. But obviously, I think one is more for the productivity workhorse-minded individual, and the other one is more for the person who's just doing everyday menial tasks that don't make much of a difference. You can just do that with your iPad Air. If you want to know more thoughts about the iPad Pro, I recently did a video comparing it to the new iPad mini. Bam! Check it out right there and come back for more.